Hey, it is Xennial Gamer, and at long last, we are returning to the Auto Win Team series. Anyway, we're back. We're gonna start the series up. I'm not gonna promise to get one of these out a week anymore. There's so much new content in the game. It's actually just, it's hard to keep a schedule with any one specific type of video, but I know this one's going to involve two premium Nat 5s, honestly, so a lot of people might not be able to make this team, but it is the single strongest auto win team in the game that I know of. You can bring it into almost anything, and it will beat almost anything, and that is Amelia, Bolverk, Skogul. So if you happen to have Amelia and Bolverk, then the odds are really strong you've got a Skogul, and we're going to talk about how you would put this team together and how you would use it. Now, to start off with, you can see my Amelia's stats behind me. You'll notice for my account, she's actually kind of slow, so I had to steal some runes from her on the major update that we just had recently, and she wound up unruned, and I found going into Guild War, I really missed using this team. It's just so much fun. So I wound up runing her in not the greatest runes for me, and the team still works just fine, and that's part of the beauty of this team, is that although we're using premium monsters, we don't necessarily have to use premium runes. Now, I know for a lot of people watching the video, the stats probably look great to you. Bear in mind that we're fighting in G3 Siege, G3 Guild War, so these actually are pretty low efficiency runes compared to most of the other monsters I'm using. This team works great in all metas, so you're just going to adjust a little bit based on your own stage of game and the quality of the opponents that you're facing, and we'll talk about that, specifically how you would adjust when we talk about the types of teams you bring this into. So the Amelia, I've got her in Violent Endure. I do strongly recommend Violent for Amelia for this team. I know she works in Swift. I know, for example, Ace uses her in Swift and probably just about never loses with this team either. Just my personal experiences. I do have another Amelia who's Swift, and when I took the runes off the Violent one, I struggled a little bit more in the Swift build. Now, part of that's just because that Amelia wasn't skilled up. But it really, to me, it just makes a big difference. The turn cycling that you get out of Violent on Amelia really makes a big difference. Also, it does matter a lot if she's skilled up. Now, you can still use this team if she's not skilled up. You can still use this team if she's on Swift. You're just not going to be able to bring it into as many defenses. It's not going to be quite as crazy OP if she's not skilled up or if she's on Swift. But when she's fully skilled and she's on Violent, this team's just freaking insane, to be honest. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the Bolverk. Now, the Bolverk is actually in Shield, Will, Endure. Now, a big key for me on this team is trying to get all of these monsters up around 100 resistance. So we've got the Amelia at 100 res, we've got the Bolverk at 100 res, and then I've got 5 Skoguls. Honestly, it works with any of them. I'm showing you the Skogul I use in Guild War, and this is actually a Violent Skogul, and I know I always tell people never use Violent Skogul on offense. The only exception to that for me is in the Amelia, Bolverk, Skogul team. I do like him on Violent for one reason. It allows me to bring it into more comps because I can actually bring this team in where I don't have a fire monster turn cycling my Skogul and he can turn cycle himself. Now it goes the other way sometimes too. He'll proc the rock and then the fight goes out a little bit longer, but on net, and part of it is just because he's got by far and away my best rune set on any Skogul. By far and away my best rune set on any Skogul, and it's because he's on siege defense. So on net, I find that this Skogul works much better. But let me tell you guys, I've been using this team for a long time, and I only upgraded the runes on this team about a month ago, probably 2 weeks before the update. The runes, especially the Bolverk and the Skogul runes, were downright mediocre by my account standards, and this team still never lost. Now, the Amelia runes were better at that time, but the Bolverk and the Skoguls that I was using just had like whatever I could slap on them. The team still never lost. And then also I only actually just skilled my Bolverk up recently. So he is full skilled now. I did it through Fusion. But again, this was just completed about a month ago and I've been using this team for many months. So the Bolverk does not actually need to be skilled up. Now I found that once I skilled him up, it was a lot more fun and the fights went faster. That's the main thing. The fights went a lot more faster and it was just kind of fun. Like you feel OP using this team, seriously, because you're just untouchable. For me, anyway, it gives me a big head, right? I use this team and I'm like, I can bring this into anything and just never lose. I mean, it's the true definition of an auto-win team. So skilling up the Bolverk is pretty much what pushed it into that like next level of OP-ness. But you don't have to skill up the Bolverk. He doesn't have to steal the buffs or anything like that. All really skilling him up does, because his damage is non-existent. So the only thing skilling him up does is gives him that extra 50% chance to steal buffs. Okay, so let me tell you guys that this is probably the easiest team to rune of all the auto-win teams. Ultimately, you don't have to hit any specific thresholds. Like if you're talking about a straight cleave team like a Copper Dozer or Kali Covenant, who it's the next auto-win team I'm doing, your monsters have to hit certain damage thresholds. They have to be strong enough to one-shot the enemy. This is basically a sustain team. So the idea here is that the Amelia gives Bolverk stacks. Bolverk then completely heals your team. So you let the enemy just keep damaging you and you just keep healing back. Ideally, the enemy is going to do some buffs as well and stack your Bolverk even faster. And then your Skogul's really doing all of the damage. Amelia will get some freezes and Bolverk might steal some beneficial effects. But basically, it's just your Bolverk's healing your Skogul and your Amelia's stacking your Bolverk. That's the basic idea of how this team works. So because of that, all you really need to do is build these monsters tanky. Obviously faster is nicer, but it's not really essential. So when I started using this team, it wasn't speed tuned at all. And I think the monsters, like my Skogul was probably 160, and this was in high G1 guild content. My Skogul was probably 165, 165 speed, about 40k HP, about 1200 defense. The Amelia had better runes, maybe 240 in violent Endure, I think, and then the Bolverk just had random garbage. I had no shield sets, I had no will runes, none of that on there, and the team still worked well. Now, over time, I've added better runes to it because I use it so much. So I will tell you the ideal runes for all three. You want your Amelia to be on Violent Will. You want the Skogul to be on Will runes, whether you use Violent or Vampire or you do any kind of broken set, that's fine. So ideally, though, the Skogul will have Will runes, the Amelia will be on Violent Will, and then the Bolverk could be on Shield Will, he could be on Violent Will. Probably the best build for the Bolverk in this team is going to be Shield Will Revenge. Or if you've got a shield set on the Skogul, then you could do the Bolverk in double Revenge Will. But now specific to the Amelia, because we've got her loaded up in screen, so what we're looking for is just HP, defense, speed, accuracy, and resistance. And you're going to adjust this pretty much based on your stage of game and what runes are realistic for you. So for me, running in G3 Siege, what I look for is about 35k HP. I actually look for, my goal for her is 242 speed, because that's what I need to speed tune with my current Bolverk build. And then of course I do like her to be at about 100 resistance, but usually when I run the search, I go from 95 to 105, so I'm not like wasting a ton. You know, if you wind up on a resistance slot 6 or something, you don't want to be 130 resistance, just kind of wasting stats. So this is the basic build that I look for my Amelia right here. Now you can see there's no builds for me. It's because I stole so many of my will runes. But when I can re-rune her, this is the build that I'll be targeting for. And again, you're just going to adjust for your stage of game. So if you're in a Conqueror guild, then maybe 28k HP and 190, 195 speed is perfectly fine. Still try to get the 100 resistance if you can, but if you can't, as long as she's in will runes, then that's really okay. She does do decent damage. You could put her in a crit damage or crit rate build, but for this team in particular, there's just no reason to. It's just wasting a lot of rune efficiency and really high quality runes that you don't need to. All she ultimately needs, and we'd put down in here, you want her to have at least 1,000 defense. 1,200 would be better. But this is all, like for G3 now, we're just talking for G3, the highest quality build she needs is this one down here. And then you can certainly adjust down based on your stage of game. Now, the last thing I'll mention on the Amelia is you do want her to be on HP slots 4 and 6. And if you've got great speed in your subs, you could also go HP slot 2. The reason you want Amelia to have so many HP is because when she goes to human form, her speed scales based off of her HP. So the HP is really the most important stat there, and you want to make sure she's got those runes. Now, when we look at Bolverk, he does not need to be on the double HP runes. Obviously, he's going to be better on them because anybody who's got a partial ignore defense can do more damage to defense-based monsters. So most of the time, our support monsters are going to be better on double HP. But a monster like Bolverk, he's going to be fine. What we care about more with him is his effective HP than specifically his actual HP. So if we just did something like 200k effective HP, and I think I'm probably actually no, I'm not higher than that right now. I'm at 194. So there you go. If we did like 194k effective HP, And then you do want him to have some accuracy. Preferably he's going to be up around 50, but it's not essential that he steals the buffs. It's just nice. It speeds the fight up, plus it's just kind of cool. It's a flex, but legitimately you don't need it. The Amelia's stacking him. The enemies who are buffing themselves are stacking him. So if you can't steal the buffs, it's not a big deal. And so the accuracy is not going to be your priority. Now, when you're speed tuning between Amelia and Bolverk, honestly, it doesn't matter a whole lot which one goes first, and I'll tell you why. If the enemy team is in full will runes, and if you've got shield and will, then your Bolverk's going to full stack. And if your Bolverk full stacks, then he can go first and take half the enemy's HP right off the bat. Then your Amelia goes second and she starts restacking the Bolverk. If the enemy is not in full will, then your Bolverk does not full stack, and then he just has to like steal an immunity from the enemy. When Amelia shifts, then she's not stacking your Bolverk because he's already full stacked. So it's kind of 50-50. Like most of the time in a higher tier siege, most of the time your enemies are going to be in will runes. In a lower tier siege or guild war, a lot of times they won't be. So if you're in lower tier ranks, then I would probably make a point of having Amelia go first. If you're in higher tier ranks, I honestly don't feel like it makes a huge difference. But I personally prefer to have Amelia go second for one big reason, which is that it puts the immunity back up on my Bolverk immediately. So again, it's probably fine either way. I mean, we're just splitting hairs right here because I'm in a max resistance build and we've got tons of sustain anyway. But I like the Bolverk to go first, Amelia to go second. If it means that my fight starts off a little bit slower because he didn't full stack, that's fine because the immunity is protecting me. Now, in terms of speed tuning, if your Amelia were 242, then your Bolverk would have to be 241 in order to have that same combat speed, which would then mean your Bolverk goes first. So your Bolverk would have to be 241 or faster. And the reason for that is he has a higher base speed. So with the rounding from your arena tower, the Bolverk can be one speed slower than your Amelia. Now, he doesn't do any damage, so he doesn't need attack, he doesn't need crit rate, he doesn't need crit damage, he doesn't need any of that. All he really needs is this effective HP down here. So again, we're talking 190k is sufficient at G3 siege content level. Adjust for your stage of game. Resistance, shoot for max resistance if you can, but again, as long as he's in will runes, it's not essential. And then the ideal build is going to be shield, will, revenge, or as I said, if you have shield runes on the Skogul, then you could do double revenge will. You could even do violent will. I don't really see a lot of value in wasting good violent runes for your Bolverk, to be honest. In RTA, it's a different story. If you're using violent runes on Bolverk in RTA, I would understand, but for guild content, I wouldn't use my premium violent runes on him because I just don't think it's necessary. Now, your Skogul build is going to be the same search stats. You're looking for all the same things. You're looking for HP, speed, resistance, accuracy, and defense. With your Skogul, if you've got the shield runes on Bolverk, then you don't need them on Skogul or vice versa. The violent runes, I said this at the start, in this comp, violent is kind of nice because it means you can kill some enemy teams that don't have fire monsters a little bit faster, but it's certainly not needed. Vampire will works. Honestly, any runes plus will are going to work. I could list them all off, but honestly, all he needs to do is be in will runes. He doesn't even technically need that. The will runes just help. You do want him to have at least 40k HP, again talking G3, and then adjust downwards based on stage of game, but legitimately, like, even in lower G1, you should be able to reach 40k HP. If you're running triple HP on him, which is what most of us do, 40k HP or something close to it, 38,000 should be reachable pretty much at all tiers of Guardian. The question is, how much additional speed and defense are you going to have on him? Those are the areas you're going to adjust. And then also, can you get that resistance on him? And if you need to go double endure will to get the resistance, that's fine as well. I like to shoot for about 240k effective HP at G3 tier. Again, you can adjust downwards a little bit. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about how and where you can use the Amelia Bolverk team. So we've got loaded just my siege defenses here. Now I can tell you all of these were actually rebuilt for the final 2 weeks of siege, and pretty much all of them had winning records. The best record of all of them was this Commune Savannah Orion, which won I think close to 80% of its defenses in G2 and G3 siege. Now as we go into this, keep in mind my Amelia does not have will, so there is a slight chance that the Orion will defense break me, and then the Savannah might wind up just wrecking my Amelia, which would cause a loss. If the Amelia had will, since I do have shield, this would be a much safer comp to bring in. This is where I said it's nice to have shield will on everything, but I am still max resistance. I do still have shield, so there's still a pretty good chance that the Amelia doesn't get defense broken, or the Orion could just derp like it did. We'll go ahead and proc the rock up, and now the Orion does not derp. The Savannah comes in, huge damage, and the Commune finishes off the Amelia. Okay, so we did lose. We did lose with this one. We'll go ahead. Actually, can I finish off this Commune? I can finish off the Commune. Oh, you know what? Single hit, right? Yeah, there we go. So we finish off the Commune. We held the rock. Steal this shield. Okay, maybe we didn't lose yet. It's not over yet. I mean, the Skogul's still alive. Ooh, okay, never mind. That's some toxic stuff right there. All right, we get the rock up. So the Bolverk's gone now. Can Skogul solo? Can Skogul solo? He gets the rock up. Whoa, wait. He lived. He lived. And that right there should be everything you guys need to know about how toxic this team is, right? The Amelia got defense broken. The Amelia got wrecked. And I still actually won. And like I said, that was a team that won about 80% of the time in G3 defense. Now, of course, there's part of that is obviously we recycle our defenses and it wears people down. But still, that defense is one of my best built defenses. From there, it should actually get dramatically easier as we test each of these. Now, again, we're just going to note that if the Lauren happens to defense break the Amelia, or if the CR lands a bomb, then it could get a little bit uglier. And that's, again, where those will runes kind of come in. So the CR landed the bomb, but maybe I can resist the stun, which I did. There you go. So I resisted the stun. Masha obviously does nothing because I've got immunity. We're going to go for that Lauren. She's the real threat on the enemy side. We'll go ahead and put up our defense buff, and this is basically GG already. We'll see if we can get a freeze, but it doesn't matter. As soon as the rock comes down, it's pretty much over. And you can see where that so my Lauren is like 70% accuracy, and so the Skogul still was able to resist right there though, which made a big difference. And that's where you really like these resistance builds. The Sierra is proccing like crazy, but it doesn't matter. We'll go ahead and just clear off that speed buff. Now the Lauren's gone, and it's basically GG right here. Okay, so as we go through these, let's talk about most of my defenses actually could be Amelia, Bolverk, Skogul. But let's just talk about like this one right here. There's no strip, so there's no danger whatsoever. The only thing is the Bolverk's going to stack a little bit more slowly, simply because the only stacking we're getting on the enemy side is from Galleons. So ideally, when we bring in this comp, we want to bring it in against like Commune, Vigor, Skogul. It's just going to absolutely wreck. Now, obviously, this is normally a defense used in 4-star siege bases. But if you guys were watching the Legend Siege tournament, they spread it across the whole field. And so it would absolutely crush because the Vigor and the Commune are both stacking your Bolverk while your Amelia's stacking your Bolverk. And the KVS would never be able to do enough damage to kill you. Even if it went proc crazy, it would never be able to kill you. Now, if we look at a team like this, the Xing Shay, Iris, Ophelia, again, we should actually be pretty good here. Now, the Iris is obviously going to strip you a lot, but the Ophelia buffs your Bolverk. Your Bolverk's going to be able to steal the provokes and steal the buffs from Ophelia, so it's a really great counter against this type of team. If we look over here at the Triton team, the Amelia is going to be able to clear all those debuffs from the Rika. The defense breaks from Annabelle aren't actually going to matter simply because there's no damage on the enemy side. The enemy side is counting on controlling you and then dotting you, right? The enemy side being my team, of course. But yeah, so the whole concept of this enemy team is we strip you, we stun you with Lance of Despair, and then we dot you with Rika's continuous damage. And Amelia just cleanses all of that. So if you look through my defenses, the one that was most primed to actually be able to defend the Amelia Bolverk Skogul is this one, which it was awfully close. We almost lost, but we didn't lose. And this was by far and away the one that would be best against that team. So we're going to call it ABS. It's a little late in the video now to change it, but the ABS team would actually probably have a near 100 win rate against all of these, with the possible exception of this one. Now, if we did, and if you change the Mimir for Kamoon, it's the same thing. So if you have a Kamoon Bastet Odin, then he's a strong Odin will one-shot your Amelia even in pony form. So you do want to be careful of any kind of team that can one-shot you. Any kind of team that has big ignore defense monsters, such as Odin. Not that you're likely to see a Copper or Dozer on defense in a 5-star base these days, but anybody who's got ignore defense, you want to watch out for those, because if your Amelia gets one shot, normally the team falls apart. That one demo fight was more of a fluke. Generally speaking, if the Amelia gets one shot, then your team's going to fall apart. So the other thing you want to watch out for is something like Galleon, Clara, Savannah, because the Savannah is going to target either the Amelia or the Bolverk, and once you lose one of those monsters, you're in trouble, because then you can't stack yourself up against that team because the enemy side has no buffs except for the Galleon attack buff. But for the most part, as I said at the start, this is probably the most powerful auto-win team I know, because you can bring it in against the widest range of enemy defenses. About the only thing you really have to be careful of is an enemy team that has a lot of speed that can potentially ignore defense, or that could stun you and then potentially ignore defense. But I mean, you see right here, my side, this defense that I'm running on the enemy side is obviously all in despair. Well, the Annabelle's violent, the other two are despair. But we landed no despair stuns. Even if we had landed some, it wouldn't have mattered. And now, as soon as I get the immunity up, the other, they can't do anything whatsoever. We're just going to blow right through them. So if you have that shield up on one of the monsters and will on all of the monsters, then you'll almost never be touched by anything. If you can't get will on all 3 monsters, just shoot for that max resistance and you're still usually going to be safe. And generally speaking, you can bring this team into about 90% of the defenses you face. So on that note, guys, we're going to wrap up this auto-win video, and I appreciate you watching. I hope there were enough of you who had this team to make it worth the showcase, but as always, I appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, if you're still with me to this point, then that means that you probably liked the video, found it entertaining, or even better, both. So please smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment down below, because those things help the channel grow, and more importantly, they show me that the video is useful, and that's the whole reason I do this in the first place.